Dan in Canada, who wants, is there any religious texts that have positive moral value? Is that your question?
It is. Hello, Jim. Hello, Richard. Thanks for taking my call. Not an atheist.
Agnostic. My apologies. Well, it says AG. Are you an agnostic? Or did they get the... Okay. My apologies. An agnostic?
Yeah.
And are you a theist agnostic or an atheist agnostic?
I don't... I was raised very fundamentalist, so I have this deep-seated fear that someday God will judge me no matter what happens, so haven't quite escaped that. I kind of hope there's a God out there on a mixed feelings, but I got no proof of a God.
No, that's cool. I was just curious. That's all. Yeah. I wasn't trying to trip you up in any way. I was just very curious. So, do you think that there are religious texts that have positive moral value?
I don't know much about religious texts outside of the Protestant Bible, so primarily what I read. I think there may be morals that can be extracted from religious texts. I believe the same thing can be true of fictional texts. So maybe with some deciphering, there would be something of value there.
And would you consider that is inherent in the text, or it can be extrapolated from a person who already carries certain moral evaluations? For example, let's say that, let's take the Quran, because it's one you're not familiar with. If you see a Muslim who is behaving in what you would consider a good moral way, would you think that they behave in that good moral way because they are inherently a good person, or would you consider that they were behaving in a good moral way because they were following specific instructions from the Quran?
I think a good moral person is a more rounded human being. So the influence of parents, of religious upbringing, of education, all have an effect on what a good moral person is. Do I think somebody specifically who is like myself, but versed in the Quran, is moral because of all the reading of the Quran? Not exclusively. But maybe they read some things that help shape them to see the world.
So I tend to agree with you, Dan. I tend to agree that if somebody is has a certain bent regarding ethics and morality, that no matter what they read, whether it be the Quran or the Tipitaka or the Bible or indeed the Lord of the Rings, they will extrapolate from that book certain guiding principles which kind of help their already innate kind of will to do good things, which will kind of, they will read that into the text and extrapolate there. And it's kind of, might be even like kind of circular. They might be a good person and they might read stuff and interpret it as being morally good and then take influence from that, which makes them a better person. So I tend to agree with what you're saying if I'm understanding you correctly. Jim, what's your opinion on this?
Yeah, so the individual parts of texts, regardless of whether religious or secular, can have good morals. I think Star Trek does a better job of presenting moral dilemmas and moral choices for the modern world than the Bible does. I think the Bible does a good job of presenting moral dilemmas and moral solutions to those dilemmas for the time period it was in. But that was a time period when slavery was okay, when misogyny was okay, when a lot of things we don't think are okay now were okay. And I think that the Bible is reflective of that. So yes, any text can have good morals and can be positive morals, but I would say that to find a text that was all positive morals, by today's standards, would probably be found in philosophical moral philosophers studying morality and writing papers than some guy 2,000 years ago reflecting the time period, his time period. I think we have become more moral as a society worldwide, and not equally morally. It's not equal improvements, right? It's kind of random here and there. I think we've got a long way to go, because we've got some recidivism happening right now in the United States, at least. But yeah, I just don't see religious texts as being particularly more moral than, say, a philosopher of morality talking today, or writing today.
That makes a lot of sense. My question comes from, I guess, an outsider's perspective, and I see a lot of head banging, and I've been listening to the show, and your last callers were just interesting. So, yeah, I'm curious as to if you can see a value to religion being such a large part of your country's psyche.
Jim?
That's such a general question. I think that the answer to that is it depends on what you're looking at. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Is there a way to bring atheists and religious organizations together for a societal benefit? Because a lot of headbutting does nothing but create bruised heads.
Yeah, that actually happens. It doesn't happen in the social media sphere where you see a lot of butting heads. But I know atheists helping the homeless typically work with religious organizations to help the homeless and to get stuff they need. Entertainingly enough, from what I understand, and I just have anecdotal evidence, don't take this as any type of study or anything else, but that the homeless tend to like the atheists helping homeless more than the Christians, because they don't get preached at when they come to get our stuff. They just get our stuff and atheist stuff and go on. Also, the atheists may tend to listen to the homeless a little bit more and bring them stuff that they actually need. So that's kind of just an aside. But yeah, it does happen. It does happen in the charity sphere and helping the less fortunate. And it even helps in some of the, because not every religious person thinks that we should be killing off the LGBTQIA community. And there are theists who are on our side with that, and that is something that atheists and theists tend to help each other out with. Some theists, some Christians do. So it depends. See, that's why I said that your original question was so vague, is because you're trying to lump a whole group of people into the same thing. And I know Christians who are very not conservative, who are very liberal in their beliefs, and they believe in a lot of the same things that I do. And so the only thing that we disagree on is whether or not there's a God. But other than that, they're very supportive of all the things that I'm very supportive of. They're very liberal. So to lump those in with people like, the evangelicals, the Christian nationalist folks, and those types of folks would be doing the good Christians a grave disservice, I think. So I don't think it's as cut and dried as you might like, but it is. But we do have things that Christians and atheists agree on. There are things that atheists and the pagan community agree on when it comes to being a minority belief system. So that stuff does happen. I just don't think it happens in the social media sphere as much as we might like.
Yeah, I tend to agree, especially where I come from. Where I come from, we have the Church of England, which in many respects is so left-leaning that it just turns in circles. It's like a spinning top. There's even I think a synod being put together, or has been kind of talked about at least, to allow kind of gay clergy. Which in some of the US kind of right-wing places would be absolutely unthinkable. But I
Well,
know American Christians.
out gay clergy would be unthinkable.
Yeah. I know American Christians who I'm friends with on social media who are gay. And the fully practicing Christians, they're fully, the faith isn't shaken, and they're great people, and they're all for like they're out, out up for letting everybody else know that they're out, and they're very supportive of those communities. So yeah, I think there's a spectrum of people in all walks of life. I know really, really kind of conservative atheists who don't accept, who are racist, who don't accept gay people, who don't accept trans people. Every kind of box we put people in as a range of people within that box. So I can't think of any. I can't think of any kind of category that we could apply to someone in which we wouldn't find an array of people in there who don't all share the same ideas.
You were talking there and had a conversation with a priest friend of mine. And his perspective on gay clergy was a little bit different than I had expected. He said there wasn't the issue with being gay. It was more the same issue that a heterosexual person being a priest would have to face of no sex, period. So as long as you're abstinent and you're not engaging in your sexual preference, it doesn't matter because you're abstinent as a priest. You're supposed to deny yourself those things anyhow. So
yeah, that would be true for a Catholic priest. Yeah, without a doubt. It's denying yourself a perfectly normal, healthy human thing to do.
Yeah, I still think it's a bit odd, and there's not even consensus amongst Catholics the world over. So,
Yeah,
gentlemen,
really
that was my questions. Thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you for calling. We appreciate it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Jim, do you want to jump straight into the next call?
I think we've got some super chats. We got 2 super chats.
Oh, yeah, we have. I didn't notice. I'm sorry. Go on, we'll do the super chats first then. Do you want to read these, Jim? I've kind of been hogging the super chats. I'll let you take them.
I will do this one. Jimmy Jr. sent $4.99 and says, next week's Talk Heathen is one you will not want to miss. We're Jim and Richard, and we approve this message. Yes, we do.
Yes, we do. Jimmy, if you're not familiar with Jimmy, is one of our newest members of the Talk Heathen roster. A fantastic host. So if you haven't caught him yet, do tune in and see Jimmy. Amazing guy. David Fairfield sends $9.99 and says, it seems like non-theists have trouble accepting moral relativism. Why is that a problem?
I think it's because it's easier to have hard and fast rules than it is to think things through, maybe. And I'm not saying they're afraid to think. I just think it's easier for them to do that. And when you start asking them questions like, okay, so telling the truth is always good. So therefore, the people who were hiding, Anne Frank and her family should have told the Germans that they were there when they were asked if they were hiding any Jews. That should have happened. And they will say, well, no. Well, now all of a sudden we're talking about relativism, right? You don't have to go too far into moral quandaries to get into moral relativism. So